Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little darker. A story about fluorescent lights.
The low hum of refrigeration units, and the kind of silence that only exists when the world forgets about you. We're heading into a place that most people never think twice.
About a pharmacy after midnight.
It's a quiet corner of the world where the only visitors are either sick,
Desperate.
or just passing through on their way to something worse. So before we dive in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments what time you're watching and where from, because this story, it always starts after midnight. Now dim the lights.
And listen close.
It was 11:57 p.m. when Ethan slid his key into the rusted lock of Hollow Pines Pharmacy, twisted it, and gave the metal door a nudge with his shoulder. It creaked open like always, sticking halfway before finally yielding to the pressure, groaning like it had a soul of its own. The strip mall outside was empty, liquor store closed, laundromat dark, neon open signs all turned cold and blank. Hollow Pines was always the last one to shut its eyes. Inside it smelled like antiseptic and cardboard, like it always did. Boxes lined the side counter. Someone from the evening shift had left the inventory half done again. Ethan sighed, dropped his backpack, and walked past the aisles without looking. The store never changed. Cough syrup, baby formula, allergy meds, hair dye, all in their places waiting quietly like ghosts in plastic bottles. He clocked in manually because the biometric
Scanner hadn't worked in months.
and sat behind the tall pharmacy counter, staring at the twin monitors in front of him. The software blinked alive with a jingle too cheerful for this hour. "Welcome, Technician Ethan. Night shift, 12 a.m., 8 a.m. He leaned back in his chair. First 30 minutes were always dead. He'd usually scroll his phone, read weird articles, maybe snack on something from aisle 2, if the manager wasn't checking security footage. But tonight, before he could even pull out his phone, something happened. The label printer chirped, not loudly, just a soft, mechanical whir, followed by the thin
Scratch of the cutting blade.
Ethan blinked. No one had input anything. He hadn't touched the system. He wasn't even logged in yet. A single prescription label had printed itself. He stared at it for a second, unsure whether to be confused or annoyed. Maybe someone from the evening shift left a request in queue. He stood, walked over, and peeled the label off the tray. It read, Patient L. Calder, 0290L V4. Pickup, midnight.
That's it. No medication name.
No doctor's signature.
No dosage instructions. No insurance info.
Just a name Ethan had never seen before, and a pickup time that was now. He checked the system. Nothing. No patient file. No RX code match, not even a draft. Just blank. And then the phone rang. Ethan turned, startled. The phone never rang at midnight. Most people didn't even know the store was open this late. He picked it up, hesitating a second too long before saying, Hollow Pines Pharmacy. This is Ethan speaking. There was silence. Then a voice, a rasp, so faint it sounded like wind on dry leaves.
It's ready, isn't it? Ethan froze. I'm sorry, who is this?
But the line had already gone dead. For a long moment, Ethan just stood there with the phone still pressed to his ear, listening to the silence after the voice had vanished. It wasn't the kind of silence you get when someone hangs up. No, this was deeper, like the line had been severed from the world altogether. He put the receiver down gently, almost afraid it might ring again if he moved too fast. He looked at the label still clutched in his hand.
L. Calder.
No first name.
No birth date.
Just those 2 syllables, clean and quiet and wrong. Ethan turned back to the terminal and ran a full system search. First for Calder, then for just the initial L, then through archived records, cancelled requests, flagged entries,
Even deleted logs. Nothing. It was like the
name had never existed inside their system. And yet the label had printed, automatically, without prompt.
And at the exact stroke of midnight.
He checked the system clock. 12:03 a.m. The hairs on his arms were already standing on end. Now here's where things get weird. Normally, when you scan a prescription barcode, even a misprint, the system gives an error. Something like invalid entry or no record found. But when Ethan scanned this label, the screen blinked once, then accepted it. Medication located, shelf 17B, handle with gloves. He stared at the screen.
Shelf 17B?
There was no 17B. The pharmacy storage only went up to row 15, and even then, they weren't labeled that precisely. The shelving system was old, half-handwritten, with peeling stickers and scribbled post-its. Whoever programmed this prompt was either a prankster or something was deeply broken. But the instruction, handle with gloves, gave him pause.
That wasn't normal, ever.
Ethan walked to the back room anyway, flicking the light switch 3 times before it finally sputtered on, revealing rows of wooden shelves stacked unevenly with plastic bins. He followed the rows slowly, counting in his head. 13, 14, 15. There shouldn't have been anything after that. But tucked awkwardly behind the last tall rack, crammed next to an unused mini-fridge, was a half-collapsed shelving unit with a bent aluminum label that had once read "Supply Overstock Do Not Use" and taped haphazardly on its side. In a different font and newer sticker was a small white tag. 7B. He stopped breathing for a second. The shelf was dusty, boxes faded, vials half visible through yellowing plastic. It didn't look like anything had been touched in years. But there, nestled between a bottle of expired antihistamines and a sealed cardboard carton labeled "Sterile, destroy by 2020, sat a single orange pill bottle. It wasn't dusty.
It wasn't old. And the label was brand new.
Patient, Ethan M. Cole, 0298L V4. Pickup, midnight. His own name. His real name. Not Technician Cole, not E. Cole from the clock-in screen. His full name, exactly as it appeared on his original pharmacy license from years ago. One he never submitted digitally. One he hadn't used since changing states. He didn't reach for it.
Not yet.
Something told him, deep in his gut, that once he touched that bottle, something would change. Something would start. Instead, he backed away slowly, heart pounding now, not from fear, but from something colder. Like whatever had printed that label.
Knew him. Not just his name, but him.
He turned and left the storage room in silence, shutting the door behind him without looking back. Back at the front counter, the system was flashing a new message. Patient arrival, 12:15 a.m., be prepared. The message on the screen kept pulsing. Patient arrival, 12:15 a.m., be prepared. It was 12:12. Ethan stared at it, the glow of the monitor staining his face in dull blue. The pharmacy was silent, but it didn't feel still. The kind of silence that vibrates behind your teeth. That makes you feel like something is breathing in the same room as you, just out of sight. He didn't want to go back to that shelf, but he couldn't sit still either. His footsteps echoed softly as he made his way back to the storage room. The air was heavier now, like humidity without heat, just a thick, invisible pressure hanging in the back corridors of the pharmacy, like time wasn't working quite right back here. He opened the storage door, and this time the light didn't flicker. It simply didn't turn on at all. But the shelf 17B was glowing, a soft bluish pulse from between the boxes. Not from the shelf itself, but from the pill bottle, like bioluminescence trapped inside amber plastic. He stepped closer, careful not to make noise, as if something might hear him. The bottle hadn't moved. It still sat wedged between the expired cartons, label facing outward. Patient, Ethan M. Cole. RX, Wolves 0298LV4. Pickup, midnight. He put on gloves, real gloves this time, from the sealed drawer labeled Biohazard. Not because he thought it was contaminated, but because he didn't want his skin touching whatever this was. As his gloved fingers closed around the bottle, the glow faded.
Not all at once.
Just slowly, like something sighing in disappointment. He held it under the flickering hallway light and turned it in his hand. It wasn't a pill bottle like the others. No expiration date.
No manufacturer code.
No ingredient listing. The cap had no safety seal. No child-proof lock, just a plain black lid, smooth and cold.
Inside were 5 pills.
Perfect spheres. Dark blue with a faint shimmer like pearls that had been soaked in oil. He didn't recognize the formula. And that terrified him more than anything. because Ethan knew drugs. He'd handled everything from trial samples to Schedule II narcotics, but he had never seen anything like these. He brought the bottle back to the front counter, dropped it into a plastic containment bag, and locked it in the small drawer below the register. Then he checked the clock. 12:15 a.m., and that's when the door buzzed.
It shouldn't have.
After midnight, the front door was always locked. Customers had to ring the night bell and speak through the intercom. But now the door had unlocked itself. He stood slowly, heart hammering against his ribs like something trying to escape, and walked toward the front of the store. The automatic lights had triggered in the front aisle. A figure stood just beyond the glass doors.
Not moving.
Just standing, wearing a grey coat with a high collar, face shadowed by the glow of the overhead lights. Ethan approached the door but didn't open it. The figure raised one gloved hand and pointed at the window, at the sliding tray where pickups were usually passed through. Then it spoke, not with its mouth, but through the intercom speaker that hadn't worked in 6 months. "For El Calder," the voice said, low and cold. "It's ready." Ethan didn't respond. He just backed away slowly, staring at the figure, whose breath wasn't fogging the glass, and whose shadow wasn't being cast by the lights behind it.
Ethan didn't move.
The figure outside the door kept pointing, still, calm, almost polite, as if this were just business as usual.
Like picking up a prescription in the dead of night.
It was no more unusual than buying toothpaste, but it wasn't normal, and Ethan could feel it, deep in his chest, down to the marrow in his spine. Something about this wasn't just wrong, it was designed to be wrong. Manufactured that way, precise, controlled. He didn't open the drawer. He didn't unlock the window. Instead, he backed into the pharmacy, past the cold glow of the counter monitors,
And made a decision he hadn't.
made in 5 years. He accessed the terminal's admin override. He didn't even know if his old credentials still worked. They did. And as soon as he was in, he did something that the company forbade. Every technician from ever doing, he opened the audit logs,
Every transaction, every modification.
every deletion.
And that's when the real horror started.
There were files, dozens, hidden behind layers of archive code, some going back over a decade, each one labeled with a patient name.
And no corresponding doctor. Names he didn't recognize.
But some of them had notes, short ones: failed delivery, disappearance confirmed, non-compliant, expired 9/14/17, handled by technician hours 03, terminated.
Ethan scrolled faster.
He saw something labeled Technician Notes E.M. Cole, his own name. But he hadn't written any notes.
At least, not yet.
He clicked it open. The file was dated 2 days into the future.
And it was filled out.
Date of termination, redacted, cause non-compliance, attempted interference, refusal to complete transaction. Last seen 12:15 a.m. in possession of package. ID 0298 LV4. He sat back in the chair like he'd been hit.
Not metaphorically.
He physically felt the weight of those words. Like reading them pulled something out of him and buried it in a place he couldn't reach. He checked the timestamp again. This report was generated automatically.
From the system. And it predicted his failure.
Before it happened.
Outside, the figure was gone.
But the pharmacy door was now cracked open an inch. Just wide enough to let something in. Or maybe just enough to let him out. He bolted to the front, yanked the door closed, twisted the deadbolt shut with shaking hands, then pulled down the old emergency shutter, something he had never needed to do before. The slats crashed into place, metal groaning like a cage that didn't want to lock. Back at the counter, the monitor flashed again. Not a system message, a chat window. E.M. Cole, you have deviated from protocol. Step away from the file server. Resume delivery.
We are watching.
He ripped the cable from the wall, but the screen stayed on, and the message blinked again.
Too late.
For a few seconds after the cable had been ripped, Ethan just stood there, waiting for the screen to flicker and die. But it didn't. The monitor stayed on, glowing cold blue, the text blinking like a slow, patient heartbeat.
Too late.
He backed away from the desk. The pharmacy, once familiar and mundane, now felt like a trap built around him. Not just haunted, but scripted. like everything was following a plan he hadn't agreed to.
And the only variable left was him.
He took the bagged bottle from the locked drawer, wrapped it in a towel, and shoved it into the bottom of the waste bin beneath the counter. He wasn't going to fill anything. He wasn't going to deliver anything. He just wanted the rest of the shift to end. But it never really did, because just before 1 a.m. the bell chimed again, except this time no one had opened the door. The sound echoed through the pharmacy, once, twice, 3 times, like the chime wasn't tied to a door sensor anymore, but to something else entirely. Ethan walked cautiously toward the front, the hair on his neck already standing. And then he saw her.
A woman standing in the waiting area.
Grey coat, high collar, pale skin, but no sound of the door sliding open.
No footsteps.
Just her standing there, facing the counter.
Hands at her sides, still, too still.
Ethan blinked and reached instinctively for the mouse to check the security feed. He pulled up the live view, camera 1 facing the entrance.
Nothing.
Camera 2, the inside register.
Nothing.
Camera 3, looking right where she stood.
Nothing.
She wasn't there. But when he looked back up, in real time, she was.
Are you here for someone?
Ethan asked, voice cracking slightly. The woman didn't answer. She simply raised one gloved hand and set it down gently on the counter. Her fingertips barely touched the surface, but they made a sound dry, like static followed by a whisper. A real whisper this time. Refill, L. Calder. He swallowed hard.
I don't have anything under that name.
There's no record of... But when he reached for the keyboard, the system had already filled the field. Refill request 0298LV4. Status, delayed. Technician interference. Below that, a new line was blinking in red. Warning, failure to comply triggers escalation protocol. He stared at her. She hadn't moved. Do you know what this is?
He asked, voice now trembling. What this?
Medication does? Who it's really for. But she didn't answer. She simply turned.
And walked away, not out the front, not through a door.
She walked toward aisle 4.
And vanished, not behind a shelf.
Not around a corner. She simply faded, like she was never made of flesh to begin with. Ethan bolted after her.
Ran down the aisle. Turned corner after corner, nothing. No echo of steps.
No scent of perfume, not even static in the air. But then he heard it, clicking, like nails on glass.
Coming from the consultation room in the back.
And when he got there, the door was ajar. Inside, the same pill bottle was sitting on the desk. Not the one he had hidden, but a second one. Same code, same name.
And this time,
it was half empty. Ethan didn't touch the second bottle. He just stared at it, heart thudding like a metronome set too fast, lungs working too hard for such still air.
same label, same code.
But the contents, 3.
Pills missing. 3. He hadn't touched the first one.
Hadn't even opened the cap. So where did this one come from? There was no time to answer. Not really. Because if there was one person in the world Ethan trusted to help when things started breaking reality, it was Clara. He hadn't talked to her in months. Not since she started diving deep into those fringe cases, the unexplained deaths, the cold files with redacted timelines. But she always answered his calls, always. Tonight, she answered after one ring. Her voice came through the line, calm, like always. But there was something beneath it. Tension. Awareness. Like maybe, she already knew. What did they send you? She asked, skipping hello. Ethan blinked.
Wait, how did you...
I've been tracking this kind of thing for 2 years now. They've moved on to pharmacies.
Hospitals before that.
Long-term care facilities. Places with quiet turnover, where death is expected. Ethan glanced back toward the desk, lowering his voice. There's a name, L. Calder, but it printed with my real name too.
Full license. A drug that doesn't exist.
Then a woman came in, no shadow, no record on any of the cameras. She asked for a refill. He heard Clara's breath catch on the other end. Then silence. Then the shuffle of papers. What's the prescription ID? She asked, voice sharp now. 4298LV4.
More rustling.
Then a long pause. Clara spoke slowly, carefully, like she was trying to keep him from hearing.
How afraid she was. Ethan, I don't want you to panic.
But that same code showed up on a death report I pulled from Alton General 6 months ago. Same initials.
Same timing.
The nurse who filled it disappeared. Her name was Elise Calder.
His stomach dropped.
Wait, Calder?
Yes, L. Calder. Elise was her middle name.
She was the first documented person to fill this thing, whatever it is.
And she's the only one we know for sure took it.
And what happened to her? They never found a body, but she showed up in 3 surveillance feeds after her death certificate was signed, just standing at night outside other clinics. Ethan was already moving.
He couldn't stay here.
He couldn't be alone with this thing any longer. He needed Clara here, needed someone real, something solid.
How fast can you get here? He asked.
I'm already 5 minutes away, she said.
I didn't want to call you until I was sure, until I was close.
At that exact moment, the pharmacy lights flickered.
Just once.
Then a new noise from the back counter.
The slow whirrish.
The printer. Again, Ethan walked to it slowly. Every step felt like it weighed more than the last. He peeled off the fresh label and felt his blood turn to ice. Patient Clara W. Dawson, 0290L V4. Pickup, 120M. He checked the clock. It was 1:17. He didn't call her back. He just waited. And when she finally stepped through the door, breathless and holding a stack of documents, she didn't even have to ask what was wrong. She could see it in his face. He handed her the label, and when she saw her name on it, printed in perfect black text, the color drained from her face.
Ethan, she whispered, you were never the target.
Clara didn't speak for a long moment. She just stared at the label in her hand like it was something radioactive.
Like even reading it might pull her deeper into whatever machine had already claimed Ethan.
Outside, the wind howled low against the shuttered pharmacy windows, as if something enormous had passed by without touching the glass. Ethan broke the silence. He said they showed up after they died. The people who took the pills. Clara nodded slowly. 3 confirmed cases, all unexplained deaths. All had no final medical records, just these. Printed labels. And one thing in common, a secondary prescription, usually generated shortly before their disappearance, for someone they were close to. Like a handoff?
Ethan asked. Like a chain?
Clara didn't answer that. Instead, she moved behind the counter and began searching the drawers like she knew what she was looking for. After a few minutes, she paused at the baseboard near the consultation window.
There, she whispered.
Ethan frowned. What? Clara reached for a small scalpel from the emergency kit and slid it along the wood.
Seam just beneath the counter.
With a little force, the panel popped free, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was something Ethan hadn't seen since the day he got the job. A leather-bound ledger. Old. The kind of thing that didn't belong in a modern pharmacy. Stiff brown leather with a bronze clasp. No dust, no wear. Like it had been placed there just yesterday. Clara opened it. Inside were names.
Dozens, maybe hundreds.
In tight, meticulous handwriting. Each name accompanied by a date, a 4-digit code, and a short note. None of it made sense at first glance. But then Ethan saw it.
His name.
Cole Ethan M. 00278L V4. Term 6:27. He checked the wall clock.
6:27 today.
Next to it in red ink were 2 words. Non-compliant delay. Clara flipped the pages faster, eyes scanning. Every person I've tracked. They're in here, she murmured.
All of them.
She turned to the next page and froze. Her hand trembled slightly as she pointed. Dawson Clara W. 00298L V4. Pending 6:27. Note, interference. Escalation required. She slammed the book shut.
We need to destroy this, she said, her voice suddenly sharp.
Right now. It's not just recording this stuff.
It's generating it, feeding the system. That's why they keep printing.
It's predictive. But Ethan was no longer looking at the book. He was looking at the camera monitor. Someone was standing in aisle 4, still, unmoving.
Grey coat, high collar, no face.
Ethan stood slowly, finger pointing to the screen. Clara turned. and the moment she did, the camera feed glitched. Just a flicker, but the figure didn't disappear this time. It began walking.
Toward them.
And for the first time since the night began, Clara looked afraid. "We're not going to wait," she said, grabbing the ledger and stuffing it into her bag. "We destroy this book or we end up in it."
Ethan reached for the emergency exit key.
The alarm override would only give them 10 seconds before the silent alert pinged corporate. Didn't matter. He unlocked the back door. But just before they opened it, a new sound came from the front of the store. The printer.
Again, and this time,
2 labels printed.
one for Clara, one for someone else.
Patient L. Calder, RX reinstatement. And next to it, something handwritten in red marker across the top. System loop incomplete. Original host must return. Clara looked at Ethan.
And Ethan, in that moment, knew what was coming.
She wasn't the one they wanted back. He was. The door should have opened. Ethan turned the emergency key, entered the override code, twisted the manual bolt, and yanked.
Nothing.
The lock didn't budge. Not even a click. The red light above the door, meant to signal exit alarm armed, wasn't on. It wasn't blinking. It just glowed solid, like the system didn't recognize that anything had been triggered at all. Clara tried the front door next. Same story, jammed, not locked, just sealed, like the air pressure on the other side had been inverted, like something out there was holding it shut from the outside in. She looked at Ethan, eyes wide but steady. "We're not trapped in a building," she said softly. "We're trapped in a loop." Ethan didn't answer.
Couldn't.
He just stared past her, toward aisle 4. The figure was there again. Closer now.
Not standing. Not moving.
Just watching. No expression, no shadow. And when Ethan squinted at the figure's head, he saw something far worse than a missing face. He saw his own, like a pale mask of himself, distorted and smooth, like someone had tried to recreate his face from memory and got it almost right. It was smiling, but not the way people smile, the way mannequins do. Clara grabbed his arm, pulling him back toward the counter. "We burned the book."
Right now. That's the only thing tethering this loop to us.
Ethan nodded and pulled out the lighter from the emergency kit, a cheap plastic flame meant for melting shrink wrap, not exercising pharmacy demons. But it would do. Clara placed the leather-bound ledger on the countertop, opened to the page with both their names, and held it still. But the moment the flame touched the paper, the lights went out.
All of them.
In one blink, total blackness. Then the printer came to life. "Where chick, where chick, where chick." Ethan lit his phone flashlight. The labels were printing faster now, one after another, spilling out onto the floor like receipts from hell. The same name again and again. Patient L. Calder, RX reinstatement. Status recursive, recursive, recursive. The floor was littered with them. Clara stepped back, almost slipping, and caught herself against the wall. The temperature in the room had dropped. Her breath fogged in the beam of the flashlight. And then, for the first time, she saw him.
Not on the monitor. Not in a reflection.
In person. Standing at the end of the pharmacy aisle. Tall, thin, wearing Ethan's face like it didn't quite fit. Bones stretched too long. Shoulders slightly too narrow. A mouth too wide. And he whispered in a voice that was almost Ethan's, but not quite. "The dose is incomplete. Return, refill, restore." Clara raised her phone, tried to take a picture, but the screen froze, glitched, restarted itself. The battery dropped from 71% to dead in 2 seconds. The figure took a step forward. Ethan grabbed the ledger again and did the only thing left. He tore the page with their names off and shoved it into the lighter flame. This time the paper caught, fast, too fast.
Like it wanted to burn.
Like it had been waiting for fire. The page turned to ash in seconds, and with it everything changed. The lights flickered back on, the temperature rose, and the figure was gone.
No sound. No fade out. Just gone.
Clara exhaled, knees buckling slightly, but the moment felt too still.
Too easy, too unresolved.
Because behind the counter, the system pinged one last time. A new prompt. Re-entry successful. Loop reset 12 a.m. and the monitor date changed.
back to the start.
The screen didn't lie. 12 a.m.
Not a new day.
Not a countdown.
The same midnight again.
Ethan backed away from the monitor as if the time itself had burned him. Clara didn't move, she just stared, her eyes reflecting the pulsing glow of the words "loop reset." Her hand tightened around the half-burned ledger, now useless pages crumbling in her grip. Ethan whispered, more to himself than to her. "We burned it. We broke the pattern. Should have ended." Clara turned to him slowly. "We didn't break the pattern. We triggered the next cycle." The pharmacy looked the same, but felt different. Cleaner, quieter, like a dream version of the same place. Like someone had reconstructed it from memory but missed the tiny imperfections. The scuff on the floor near aisle 3 was gone. The chip in the plexiglass divider was smooth again. Even the faded posters for flu shots had been replaced with crisp,
untouched duplicates.
It was all too new. Ethan ran to the front door and tried again.
Still locked.
But now the street outside was wrong. The buildings across the parking lot were gone.
No lights, no traffic, just fog.
Dense, static grey, pressed up against the windows like cotton soaked in ash. They were nowhere. Clara tapped at the security terminal, trying to force it into diagnostics. The screens buzzed, flickered, then began cycling through internal camera feeds.
That's when they saw it. Camera 2 front counter, normal, empty.
Camera 3 back hallway, normal, still. Camera 4 consultation room.
Someone was sitting there.
Back turned, facing the far wall, motionless. "Who's that?" Ethan whispered. Clara didn't answer. She was already pulling up archived playback, footage from earlier that night when Ethan first arrived. But this time, something was missing. In the video, the door opened. The bell chimed. The camera angle caught the person walking in. The figure looked like Ethan.
Same clothes, same backpack.
But when the recording reached the moment,
Ethan had checked the printer.
The video didn't match his memory, because in the footage, he never picked up the label. He just stood there, blank, waiting, and behind the counter, barely visible in the reflection from the window, stood someone else, wearing the same coat the woman had worn.
Same gloves.
Same hollow stare. It was Clara.
Watching.
But Clara had arrived hours later.
Hadn't she?
Ethan looked at her.
That's not right. That can't be right.
Clara's hands were shaking now. She brought up the audio logs, trying to prove their memory true. But all the recordings played back silence. No conversation.
No phone call.
Just the faint sound of breathing.
One breath.
Then another. Then a third one layered underneath, something not human. A wet, ragged exhale like lungs that didn't belong in this world, were trying to imitate the rhythm of theirs. Ethan turned around and saw the security mirror above the vitamin aisle. In it, there were 3 people standing in the store, but only 2 were real. The third one stood behind them.
No face. No shape.
Just presence. Clara backed up fast, almost tripping over the printed labels still scattered across the floor. Then the monitor flashed again.
One final message. Only one of you can leave.
The message blinked on the screen over and over, as if it were pulsing in sync with Ethan's own heartbeat.
Only one of you can leave.
Clara stared at it.
Then at Ethan. Then back at the message again.
She didn't say it, but he saw it in her eyes. The same question burning into both of them.
Why?
The printer came to life one final time.
A single label.
Ethan stepped forward, hand shaking, and peeled it from the tray. Patient, Ethan M. Cole. RX final refill, IR298LV4. Status processing. Awaiting confirmation. Below that, scrawled in smeared red ink. Replacement located. Hose transfer optional.
Then suddenly it clicked.
The cycle wasn't about killing. It was about replacing.
Not removing people from reality, but rewriting them.
Swapping them out with something that looked close enough. Something the world wouldn't notice. Something that could smile and nod and take your place. And no one would ever ask.
Why your laugh didn't sound the same.
Clara looked at Ethan like she understood.
They never wanted me, she whispered.
They wanted you back in the system. He nodded slowly.
And you're the outlier.
The variable, she said. One they didn't account for. Outside, the fog pressed harder against the windows. Lights in the pharmacy began to dim one by one,
Aisle by aisle, like a stage play wrapping up.
like they had already overstayed their time. Clara grabbed the bag with the ledger remnants, her notes, and a small black USB she had shoved into her pocket hours ago. She handed it to Ethan. "If you make it out..."
You tell them. Everything. You show someone what this place really is. Promise me.
Ethan looked at her.
Clara.
"I'm not leaving."
What? No, Clara, you don't have to.
But she smiled weakly. "Yes, I do.
Because only one of us can go. And we both know.
The system is watching you, not me." She turned and walked toward the back of the store,
Toward the dark.
toward shelf 17B.
Ethan called after her once, twice.
She didn't turn around. The monitor blinked again. Host confirmed.
Transfer accepted.
And then the air pressure shifted, like the building exhaled. The front door clicked open. He stepped out.
Fog curling around his feet.
Streetlights blinking in a rhythm he didn't recognize. And behind him, the pharmacy was already gone. Just an empty lot. No signs, no windows.
No building.
Just vapor, like it had never been there at all. The USB was still in his pocket, and he was the only one who remembered her name. So before you get comfortable again, take a second to like this video and subscribe. But only if you truly enjoy the kind of darkness we bring here.
And in the comments, tell me what time it is where you are.
And if your pharmacy ever printed a name you didn't recognize, this is Clara After Dark, where stories live. And some never leave. Stay aware.
Stay awake.
And if the prescription isn't in your name, don't pick it up.